Hello, my friends. Let me say welcome to our first in a series with none other than the indomitable Herb Nelson Jr. Let me say this that we have been introduced to Herb Nelson over the last couple of years, and we have not had anyone like Herb in our diaspora in the public space. I say that because we know our diaspora and we talk about the partisanship. So every time you speak to someone, you can't speak about certain things because there is always some partisanship there. But every time I have had the pleasure of listening to Herb, he always focuses on data. And data has always been regarded as the only thing that is never wrong. And so I find at a certain point, we need to understand what created the Herb Nelson we know. Where is it coming from? What has he been doing all this time before we were introduced to him, as the expert and the crime czar that he has become as he represents and steers that part of our diaspora presence with the Institute of Caribbean Studies. So I'm going to say, ladies and gentlemen, we are making history this afternoon because maybe for the first time, we are getting a look behind the curtain at none other than the man we call Herb Nelson Jr. Herb, welcome to SosoFat Media Network.
Thank you, Trevor. Good afternoon to you and your listeners. I know that we've been talking a long time, but we've never got down to the basics like we are today. And I'm looking forward to it. And also looking forward to commentary from your listeners as well.
Yes, well, my question is, Herb, we know that, you are born Jamaican, a man of the soil.
Yep.
So where were you born? Where did you go to school? When did you find yourself off of the rock? Tell our people a little bit about you, because that is where, like I said, if you don't know where you're coming from, you don't know where you're going.
Right.
So let's talk about that background that I myself is completely ignorant of.
Okay. Trevor, I guess 1951, my mom tells me that she was pregnant and Hurricane Charlie was battering the house at Barbican Road. And she and my dad was trying to hold the windows in, I said, wow, I must have been kicking up a storm then,
You mean you kicked up the storm?
Hey, what can I tell you? Because all I know, Trevor, is I am born with this attitude that I need to know what happened, when it happened, why it happened, and if it could have been avoided.
Okay.
It's just my inquisitive, investigative nature.
Okay.
And so I found that I came through the Catholic schools in Jamaica, the Alpha school system, right? Infant school, primary school, scholarship to St. George's College, finished high school at St. George's College, and then had to leave and come up to the U.S. when my dad has a heart attack. He was retired from the 3rd Battalion JNR. He was band sergeant at Jamaica Military Band, and he has served 28 years.
Wow.
Right. So I was in the Cadet Corps, and I remember that I was in charge of the band at St. George's College. Right? He had arranged for me and a friend of mine, Wes Van Riel, to go up to a park camp and to learn from the best drum major there was ever in the JDF. I think they call him Blackjack.
Okay.
Spinning that thing around his arms and his neck and everywhere else, right? And the bottom line is, I enjoyed being a military brat coming up and watching the various things that he went through and that friends of his was going through as well. Let me put it this way. He wanted me to learn music. I learned the drums, right? And after the drums, another band member, David Madden, who plays trumpet in a couple other bands there in Jamaica, offered to teach me the trumpet. Right?
Oh,
I never got around to it, but just to tell you at that time, I was into football, right?
you mean
Soccer.
soccer?
Soccer, yes.
Yo.
So yeah, I know the listeners, some might know, some may not, but
Yes.
soccer. And I was on the Jamaica under 15. I played in Swallowfield minor league with my friend Underl City Williams. And we were both going over to the stadium training with the Jamaica under 15 team, right? You had
Okay.
Chicken Mason, you had Jeffrey Maxwell, you had all of those name guys there. Strangely enough, I never went out and played for Colts or Manning Cup team at St. George's. But I remember coming down to George's with a Swallowfield team that beat the living daylights out of George, right? And then when my dad decided I was getting too wild in Swallowfield, he said, "You know what? You got to come back home to Barbican."
Okay.
Brought me back up to Barbican, and then I started playing with what they call Constant Spring. Today's modern. It was Constant Spring Youth Club, and the team at the Division 2 level before we went to Division 1 was called Golden Aces.
Hold on. You used to play Premier League football in Jamaica?
I left the very year we made the Premier League.
Okay.
72, that's when I migrated.
Oh
Right?
boy.
And I migrated because I'd got my girlfriend pregnant. And
So you were not running away, right?
yeah, rather than fight the battle, Trevor, a friend of the family's at the time, Winston Spalding, QC, got a hold of me and say, "Look, you're getting into too much trouble, and your parents want you up in New York, right?" And he advised me not to fight her getting abortion and all these other things. So I said, "Okay." At the time, I was 19 years old. So I said, "Yeah, I'll go down cut out." And I inquired into a football scholarship that I was once promised with Professor Ara Wees at NYCC.
Okay.
And I came up, it was June. So it was kind of early. But then my dad had his heart attack. And I said, wait a second. My salary from there at Cars and Commercials, which is part of John Crook Limited, my salary is not there anymore. And I was the one putting my brothers through school, high school and stuff. So I said, I got to do something. I cannot be without a job. So I went out, took the test for New York Telephone, took the test for Con Edison, passed them with flying colors. The man them say, well, because you haven't been drafted and you don't have a draft card, we can't hire you.
Oh.
Which I didn't know it wasn't accurate at the time. So I went down to British Leland, which is in New York. I took their test, blew it away, right? Because I was doing bookkeeping.
Yeah.
And math was my favorite subject, and I was good with numbers. And I went ahead, interviewed with them, and they said, well, you need a degree to do the bookkeeping. I said, I was doing it for British Leland in Jamaica, John Crook Limited. That's who we were. We sold, Daimler, Jaguars, the Morris series, Austin series. And they say, yeah, we understand that, but you need a degree. So I realize now everybody's making an excuse. The old racism and the old don't have a draft card. All these things was playing on me. I had my green card, so I really didn't need anything else.
Right.
And even if I got drafted, it would not be maybe for another year or so, and then I would be able to go and volunteer for reserve or guard, National Guard, and come back and serve it right there in New York.
Okay, well, Vietnam was going on at that time.
Vietnam was in full swing at the time.
Okay.
My parents didn't want me anywhere near, even though they knew I had the background for it. They didn't want me anywhere near. So I was
Right.
there from the 30th of April. And by the mid-June, I said, you know what? I made up my mind. I'm going to get this military service out of the way.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to go in for 3 years, volunteer, go in and then come back out.
Uh-huh.
So I went in, did the volunteering. At the time, the pay was $89.30 a month.
A month.
Yep. So you can imagine, I'm going in for that little bit of money. So I say, I need to figure out how to raise my pay.
Okay.
And they say, well, you can volunteer and be a paratrooper, and you get an extra $55 a month, tax-free.
To jump out the place, right?
Jump out the plane, yeah.
You guys are funny. You guys are funny.
Give it to me. I'll take it. No problem. Right? I mean, I remember a cousin of mine in Jamaica, Vivian. Vivian used to say to me when we watch TV, and they have a program called Smoke Jumpers. Firemen who jump into the fire and light backfires so that it robs the oxygen from the fire, and the fire couldn't move forward. It will come back, stay in place. Right? So he says, man, if you ever go to the States, you think you can do that? I say, yeah, sure. No, you can never do that. So I just wanted to stuff it down his throat, right? But here I am, and here I am jumping out of planes, right? So I got that out of the way, and then, remember going in, and the man told me, he says, look, we need, people in the support arena for special operations. And he says, you did well on the test, and we're going to send you up to Fort Devens, where they have the 10th Special Forces up there. But we're going to send you, and you're going to do on-the-job training up there. He says, you got the accounting background, you got this background, that background. He says, they're looking for people with versatility.
Right.
They sent me up to Fort Devens, Massachusetts, down in the valley, Erie, Massachusetts. And I got there, and we, all the training that we're going through, the basic training, I blew it away. Matter of fact, I remember running a mile in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. Okay. And the only guy that could beat me was the champion from NCAA, the champion miler.
Okay.
Right? Because I could run back in the days and do anything I wanted to do because of soccer, right?
Right,
and,
right.
The commander said to me, Herb, he says, I don't want you proving yourself. You don't have to prove yourself anymore. Your sit-ups, your push-ups is good, and your 1 mile run is good. He says, I got some guys here cannot complete the mile, and they have to complete it in 8.5 minutes. He said, I want you to physically run with them and do whatever it takes to get them around the track and get that 8.5 minutes in.
Okay.
And I remember I had to lock arms with some of these guys.
Drag them down the track.
Run them around the track. We're at Fort Dix in New Jersey. It was June of 1972. And I took them guys around the track. I bring one around. Only one guy ever failed, and I had to go back and get him. Right? Another time. But every one of them I got in, about 4 or 5 of them I ran with. And that's how fit I was back in the days, right? But I would get fitter based on the type of training that was ahead of me, right? So I've been through all of that. I remember, you know, there's something called proficiency pay in the military.
Uh-huh.
And if you are very good at your job and they give you a job test, right? At the time it was admin. And I took the job test for admin and I scored in the top 5%.
Okay.
Top score being 150. I scored 136.
Uh-huh.
So right away I started drawing extra money called proficiency pay.
Okay.
Right? And then they moved me on from there to my unit, go through the paratroop school, stationed at Fort Devens with 10 Special Forces, support battalion. I'm drawing now the base pay, the paratroop pay, and proficiency pay.
Okay,
Now I can send money.
So you moved from $89.
$89, yeah. I was rich. And all of these other pays are tax-free, by the way, right? So now I can send money home. Now I can say, hey, matter of fact, at one point I was sending the entire paycheck.
Okay.
Right? Because I got 3 meals a day, didn't have to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
I had a place to sleep. I was
No
wearing my
rent.
uniform 6 days a week, the little civilian clothes I had, right? I didn't need it, you know. I just go with the t-shirt and shorts on a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
I'd go to church, come back to the barracks, and that was it. That's my life. So then we would deploy.